We're studying, as you see on the screen, the travel to Mount Sinai. So, what we're doing is from Egypt down to Mount Sinai. And you can see the generally thought route down on the east side of the Gulf of Suez today, as you see that. And you'll want to kind of keep that in mind. The quick way up to the land of promise would have been to go straight across the north, just south of the Mediterranean Sea there, and just go across. Let me see if I can show you. It'd be across this way. That is called the way of the Philistines in your text, because the Philistines lived over here, and they, in traveling with trade, with products they were selling and all, would go, of course, they would come straight across here. But there would be difficulties that way. They would run into each other, and it would not be a good situation for the Israelites to go out and have such warfare immediately. It's going to be bad enough with the Amalekites that the Israelites will get involved with a little later on, as they come down toward Mount Sinai. So that's what we want to look at first. Actually, what we're going to see is a kind of a series of miracles that take place in this story. And God being very, very much personally involved in the events of this travel down to Mount Sinai, where they will be given the law by God. So I want you to look at chapter 13 for a moment in Exodus, if you will. Take a quick look. Two things happen just that are incidentally recorded here, starting at verse 19. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So that's the first thing we want to notice. As they go out of Egypt, they carry this, apparently a sarcophagus, with a mummified Joseph in there. Remember, we've gone quite a bit of time in our story. We've gone a couple hundred years from Joseph to the Exodus, from 70 people to about 2 million people we're talking about in the exchange here of time. So the text really tells us 230 years they were slaves in Egypt. And that would include the time of Joseph down in the land. But quite a long distance of time that they've had. Now, the second thing we note here at the end of chapter 13 is the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. So that's going to tell us that God is in control. God is saying, you follow this cloud. This cloud is going to lead them. It's going to protect them. Do you see on your little slide that we've given you? This cloud is going to represent God's presence with them. So they should never forget that He's there and He's overseeing all of this. His protection, He's going to protect them with this. You know, in a immediate chapter coming up, we're going to have God moving that cloud back behind the camp of the Israelites, between them and the Egyptians. And so He's going to keep the Egyptians held at bay while He crosses the Israelites over the Red Sea, through the Red Sea. You see, so it's His protection, His provision. He's going to provide for them what they need to protect them. And then His guidance. And what they are going to be told is to follow this cloud. Go where it goes. Don't go anywhere else, you see. You can imagine an Israelite, for example, someday the cloud rises and begins to move. So this Israelite says, "Oh, I'm too tired today." Now, how's God going to take that? Not well. Or here's a little lady that says, "You know, in my heart, I just feel like I ought to stay here today and not go there tomorrow." How would God take that? Not very well. Or here is a young guy that is pretty much independent in his thinking and a little bit rebellious. And he says, "I don't think I'll go where the cloud's going. I think we can get through the wilderness just most any way you want to go, because God's going to take care of us. So we'll just go where I think I'll go this way and the cloud's going this way." How's God going to take that? Not very well. So what does that speak of? Yes, it is. It speaks to their failure to follow God's authority. And that's a big message for us, isn't it, today? We need, more than anything else, I think, as a foundation, fundamental foundation, to recognize God's authority. And when He's leading us, we need to follow where He leads and not think our own ways are better than His or equal to His in any way, you see. So here we have this cloud. They see the cloud. At night, it's a pillar of fire. So you see this cloud leading them. In this picture, the cloud is leading the children of Israel and showing them where to go. Let me show you a passage of Scripture you ought to mark while we're thinking about it. Let me see if I can find the right one. It's in the book of Numbers, chapter 9. Can you get there right quickly? Numbers 9. And here's what it says, and I want you just to watch how this is said, how it is presented. And Moses, of course, is God's writer here for him at this point. And he says in verse 15, "On the day that the tabernacle was raised up, So when they took the tabernacle to get ready to move, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony. From evening until morning, it was above the tabernacle like the appearance of fire. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up above the tabernacle, after that, the children of Israel would journey. And in the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. So who's telling them where to go and where to stay? God is. See, that's the point of this. At the command of the Lord, verse 18, at the command of the Lord, the children of Israel would journey. And at the command of the Lord, they would camp. As long as the cloud stayed above the tabernacle, they remained encamped. Now look, verse 19. Many days, when the cloud continued long, many days. See, sometimes the cloud would move, and then it would stop, and they would camp, and the cloud would stay there. It would stay many days sometimes. Verse 20, so it was when the cloud was above the tabernacle a few days. What is this saying about the children of Israel and what they know? It's saying they've always got to be ready to move. It's saying they don't know when everything's going to take place, because God knows, and God's going to take care of that, you see. So if they stay a long time in a place or a short time in a place, they have to always watch the cloud. What's the cloud doing this morning? We do that. Is it going to rain? We do that. But God says, now I'm going to move today. They all have to get quick, ready to go and get moving. You see. And they might stay there a year. See? He says, verse 22, whether it was 2 days, a month, or a year that the cloud remained above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. But when it was taken up, they would journey at the command of the Lord. Here's your verse that says this is not just history. This is an authority lesson. That's what it's saying. This is an authority lesson. At the command of the Lord, verse 23, they remained encamped, and at the command of the Lord, they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord at the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. See? So important, I think, to see this. And as you go, chapter 14 here is going to talk about crossing the Red Sea and how that cloud protected them. When you get to the last chapter of Exodus, incidentally, it's chapter 40. When you get to the last chapter of Exodus, it's going to say God brought that cloud down on the tabernacle to show his approval of what they had constructed, and the fact that he was present with them, and the fact that they were to follow him all the time. So that's where we are with that. I don't know what that fiery business looked like. It could have looked like something like this, like lightning. Some have suggested it might look like lightning flashes and all of that, the cloud at night. Some have suggested it was just a constant glow, almost like daytime, like the sun almost. I don't know. We have to just imagine that, I guess, for our purposes. Okay? Any question about the cloud and the direction of the cloud? Yeah.
Certainly established the idea of we see regularly pilgrims.
Uh-huh.
Pilgrims on a journey. Never paying for anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. And they were headed toward home. They were to go that way. Okay, now then, let's look at the Red Sea crossing just a moment here. God led them around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and he told them to camp before the sea at Pi-hahiroth, which was an encampment type thing, apparently near the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds is a more literal translation, I think, of what the text is saying there, where they were. I want you to notice again this idea of authority, God's presence, God's protection, God's guidance, God's providence in all of this as you go. Look at verse 13. Stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord, they are told. They were frightened. The Egyptians were coming upon them. So now they're going to go with God because he's going to make salvation for them. And the way he will do it, of course, is to divide the waters of the Red Sea so that they can go in on dry land. Their salvation as a nation of people is going to be seen there. Verse 14, the Lord will fight for you. Verse 16, you'll go through on dry ground. And verse 19, an angel of God went before the camp. You see. So they crossed the Red Sea with Moses telling them, walk through on dry ground. How would you feel going across the Red Sea in between the two sides? I mean, if it looked something like that, where the waters were parted and here they were on both sides of you, how would you feel walking through there? A little spooky, you think? You'd be moving pretty quickly, wouldn't you? Well, and they probably had to move a little quickly, I would think, if there are 2 million of them going through there. That's a lot of people. A lot of people. We talked about that last week. If you remember, the numbers in the text are males 20 and over, 603,000, I think, in one case. They're counted 3 times in the Bible text, and in each case it's close to 600,000. It's 600,000 plus a few in each case. So interesting when you add in the women and the children and the animals and everybody. Quite an amazing story. It really is. Got it? Okay, now they start down from the crossing of the Red Sea. Remember last week we talked a little bit about Moses' song, the Song of Moses, and the Song of Miriam. So we talked about that. And they praised God after the waters enclosed over the Egyptians. The text tells us not one of them survived. Not one in the Egyptian army survived. So they began their march down to Mount Sinai. And they come to a place called Marah. And Marah means bitter, bitterness. Does that word come up somewhere else that you might be familiar with? Yeah. Naomi uses this word in the text. So they had no water until they get to Marah. And they got there and they couldn't drink the water because it was bitter. So the Lord showed Moses a tree which he threw into the water, and the water was made sweet. So we're getting more miracles. And what does each miracle do? What are the miracles for? Yes, in each case, these miracles are done by the Lord in a very open way to show that He's the one giving them the blessing. So the bitter waters are made sweet in this miracle. 2 or 3 of these early miracles provide water for the people. They're going to get water from a rock, and they get water made potable for them. In this case, you see. So the miracles are what we're kind of looking at here, beginning with the cloud moving in front and behind them, crossing the Red Sea. Then they get down to Marah, and here the bitter waters are made sweet for them. Okay? Then they come to Elim. And Edom is an oasis. And I'm not certain exactly why we are told about Elim in the way that we are. It's very brief. It doesn't appear to be a miraculous. But here's what we are told. We are told that there were 12 wells there. How many tribes are there? 12. And there are 70 palm trees. How many people went down into Egypt? 70. I don't know if that is of that tremendous significance in God's plan or not, but that's all we're told about this. Yes. Well, exactly. And it seems that there must be some correlation here in the fact that we really don't have, what do we have? 3 verses, 3 or 4 verses? And that's it, and this is all that we're told. And we clearly expect this is not the only water they ever had, but it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Apparently a large oasis with 70 palm trees, that's pretty good space for them in this case. So we can take that as we go. You probably can't read all of that. Mara, here's Mara right here. And they're coming down from up in this area. Okay, they come to Elam here, and then on down through Rephidim. Okay? Now, in Exodus chapter 16, we move along a little bit here in the text. I want us to watch the text. This is the 15th day of the second month from Egypt. So how long would that be about? 45 days about in their count, which would be a little over 6 weeks. They've been living like this. So put yourself in their place now. They're living out of their suitcases, aren't they? Kind of rough life. I mean, they're not in a lodge at Yellowstone or something. They're in a difficult situation. So these people start murmuring about their conditions. Do you think we might be murmuring a little bit about our conditions after 6 weeks on the road, literally on the road, not in Lexus automobiles, are they? Or RVs? Yes, and when you read this, you need to think that way. You need to read it with your mind asking, what would it be like, and what would I have felt, and all that. There are 10 specific cases that I have identified where these people murmur against God. Maybe we'll catch that a little later in the wilderness sections in Numbers. But they grumble, complain, and it gets pretty widespread apparently among the people. It's not just one or two people fussing. It's everybody. And the Lord takes it personally in some of these cases, as we'll see as we go. But they say, oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. Now, they can't mean that if they would think it through, you think? I mean, I wish the Lord had struck me down. Well, you say that when you're mad or when you're angry or when you're grumbling, complaining, but you don't really mean that, I think. Yes?
I'm thinking of Esau right now, thinking of the stomach rather than his head.
Uh-huh.
He's hungry. Similar situation in the children of Israel, hungry, thinking of stomachs, and not clearly thinking what God is doing.
Right. How much food stuff do you think they would have after 6 weeks away from Egypt? Maybe some livestock. Yeah. So the question really becomes, what did they have? And they had very little. So God said, I will rain bread from heaven for you. Gather a portion every day. Gather twice as much on the sixth day. Why is that? Yeah, this is kind of a preview of the Sabbath commandment that hasn't really been given to them yet, but which they're getting ready to have. And so he says, on the sixth day, gather twice as much. What would happen if they gathered twice as much on the third day? It would spoil, it would rot, and be negative for them. If they tried to gather too much, that was bad. If they gathered on the wrong days, that was bad. What am I hearing again? What am I hearing again? God's in control. You got to respect God's authority. You got to depend upon Him in your life rather than depending on yourself in life. That's the focus of the lessons that we're beginning to get as we go toward 40 years of wilderness wandering. They're going to have to remember all these things in that period of time, you see. So Moses says, your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord. Now, they focused them on Moses. They blamed Moses, didn't they, in all of this? As you read through this, they're blaming Moses. And Moses goes to God. So God says, all right, I'm going to feed them. At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So the quails came up at the evening, verse 13. We're in chapter 16 now. Small round substance, fine as frost in the morning. What'd they call that? What is it, they said? And what was it? What does the Bible call it? Manna. Manna. And what was it like? Is it described for us here? What? What God gave looked like frost on the ground, didn't it? And then they made, apparently, bread from it, wafers maybe from it. How is it described? All right. It's frost, looks like frost on the ground. What does it taste like? Tastes like honey. Anything you can think of like this? What's that? Coriander seed. Yeah. What's that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what that was. And yes. Tastes like honey. Honey grams? You reckon? Somehow I have in my mind it was something like vanilla wafers or something like that. Do you think? Just fits the description about as close as we've got anything that we buy at Publix. Graham crackers or honey wafers or vanilla wafers or something like that. It seems like it's something that would be like that. How would you like to eat vanilla wafers every meal, every day for 40 years? Would you get tired of vanilla wafers? Probably would. Probably would. Put yourself in these people's position again, you see, as you're studying. So they say, "What is it?" And God says, "This is manna from heaven." So what are we hearing? God's providing. God's taking care of his people. He's giving them what they need. What kind of meat do they get? Quail. So that will come. And God brings them in. He flies them in. We'll say, these quail. Okay, so they provided the meat. The manna daily allotment per person was 1 omer. That's what they were together. And that is about 7.5 pints, almost a gallon dry weight. How you figure that is what they're allowed to gather. Okay? So God says, take a pot and put an omer of manna in it and lay it up before the Lord. Now he's talking to Aaron here. To be kept for your generation. So Aaron laid it up before the testimony to be kept. The testimony is in the tabernacle. So he's kind of projecting what they should do. They should gather this manna, seal it up, it would be kept, and it was one of the things that would be put into the tabernacle. Ark of the Covenant. It would be put into the Ark of the Covenant a little later on. They would do that. So Aaron laid it up before the testimony to be kept, the text says. Remember now, they haven't constructed the tabernacle yet at this point. So this is kind of a forecast, projection. Okay, then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, which is up to the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. That's verse 1 of chapter 17. And so God is going to have to provide water. Again, the people contended with Moses, and they said, "Give us water that we may drink." So Moses said to them, "Why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord?" So here we are back with this back and forth between the Lord and the people here. And again, we have this authority issue. So the people said, "Why is it that you have brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So they're blaming the Lord and they're blaming Moses, aren't they? As they go. Right.
But this way they really, truly know their dependence on him. If he just supplied all this the whole time they left, it'd be a lot less appreciative.
Yes, it wasn't a natural provision, was it? It's a special provision. I think that's the point you're making, that it's a special provision from the Lord, and they need to learn dependence on him from the beginning not only their need to depend on him, but that he will provide, that God will come through for them. And we need that in our lives today. We really do. So Moses cried, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And God said, "All right, stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, that the people may drink." I don't know what that looked like, but it could have looked something like this, I guess. They're down near Mount Sinai. What is Horeb is another name for the mountainous region around what was called Mount Sinai. So Horeb, and this water comes out of the rock. It would have to, I guess, be something that profuse, wouldn't you think, to take care of that many people? So it's got to be quite a bit. All right. So they tempted the Lord. Massa, Meribah, because of the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" they say. It seems, doesn't it, that their complaining becomes more intense and more pointed, more directed toward the Lord in this case as they go. That's probably natural reaction. They shouldn't do it. It's sinful, but it's probably the longer you're in a testing situation, the worse it gets. And that's the way they are going to be. All right. Now, in chapter 17, we also have this war with the Amalekites. This takes place at Rephidim. And this is where we begin to get Joshua in the picture. And that's, I think, a big part of why this story is told. Of course, we have here another way in which God is protecting his people and providing for them and going to war for them in this case. Moses is on the mountain with his rod. And you'll notice now, God tells him ahead, hold the rod up. When he's holding the rod up, God is with him. When he drops the rod, what happens? So what are we getting here? Another lesson in authority, another lesson in God's provision for his people. You see, Aaron and Hur support him holding up his hands. And that is seen apparently by the people. That will be further providential explanation of the people for Aaron being chosen. They're relatives of Moses anyway. Remember now, Moses is Levitic. His brother is Aaron. So they're out of the same family. Aaron will be the high priest. Moses will be the leader of the people. Okay? All right. So there he is. Now, in chapter 18, there's kind of an organizational matter that is taken up here in chapter 18 that you want to be aware of. And that involves Jethro, whom we had earlier identified. Jethro is also known as Ruel, and he is Moses' father-in-law. And so what we get here is kind of a family situation. First of all, we learn Moses has two sons. Whoop, hit the wrong button. There we go. Gershom and Eliezer. These are Moses' two sons. He has two sons. And Jethro rejoiced and blessed God, and he said, "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods." And he took a burnt offering and some other sacrifices. And Moses was judging the people. Everything was coming to Moses, and it had to be shifted. So that's the second bell. I think we better stop. Maybe I'll start right here. And actually, this kind of leads into where God is going to give them law anyway. So I think this is a good place to stop. Let's stop there, and we'll move on next week with that. Okay?